Hi, and welcome to the Haverhill Journal, where we give you a quick look at what's going on in our city. I'm Lindsay Paris, and this week, it's the Haverhill Journal's 100th episode!
4 years, 100 episodes, 256 segments. Can you believe it? How do you mark an occasion like a 100th episode? By coming up with a top 30 countdown of Haverhill facts you don't know. Okay, if you're a regular journal viewer, you may know some of these, as we have covered a lot of them over the years. But keep watching, because you're in for the most unique journal ever as we count down the top 30 things you don't know about Haverhill. Let's start with the basics. Where did the name Haverhill come from?
The Native Americans called it Pentucket, but the name Haverhill came about because of the city's first minister, John Ward, who hailed from Haverhill, England. He also built a house behind me in the early 1700s, which was later moved here to the Buttonwoods Museum. How did the Buttonwoods get its name? From all the buttonwoods trees around the property. Buttonwoods are more commonly known as sycamores. However, the giant tree that used to stand here before it fell last year was known as the worshipping oak. It was not a buttonwoods tree. Speaking of Haverhill, England, did you know that it is the official sister city of Haverhill, Massachusetts? Now, are there any other Haverhills out there? You betcha! There's one in Iowa, Kansas, New Hampshire, and Florida. You probably don't know that Haverhill was the home of the very first roller coaster. Probably not the kind of coaster you're thinking of. Nope, not that, but an indoor roller toboggan that ran around the inside of a skating rink in a figure-8 formation. That was the very first ride to be called a roller coaster, and it was right here in this spot on Essex Street. Now, speaking of this spot, you may have noticed this giant mural behind me. I'm sure you've seen it before, but what you may not know is that it was commissioned by local group Team Haverhill in 2012 and is called the Essex Street Gateway Mural. It features famous current and former residents, including Louis B. Mayer, who opened his first theater on Essex Street right here, known as the Orpheum. Mayer would eventually go on to own all the movie theaters in Haverhill before moving to Hollywood and becoming one of the most famous movie producers in the world.
100 years later, movie lovers still flock to our city to enjoy its own internationally recognized Haverhill Film Festival. 80 short films and 6 to 10 feature films will be shown in this year's festival, set for October 2018.
And Hollywood still comes calling on occasion. 3 years ago, parts of the hit movie Joy were filmed right here on Merrimack Street, as an early April day was transformed into a Christmas wonderland.
Speaking of Christmas, how many cities have a 7-foot-tall Christmas bell that plays holiday music all season long? None other than Haverhill, and it will be back for December 2018.
When the holidays roll around, you always start the season by watching the Macy's parade, right? Well, did you know that the very first Macy's parade was right here on Merrimack Street on July 4th, 1854? Roland Macy started his department store empire right here, before moving both the store and the parade to New York.
The Patriots connection. What connection does Haverhill have with the New England Patriots, other than being home to hordes of mega fans? The Patriots played their very first game here at Haverhill Stadium in 1960.
How many cities have their very own namesake disease? Like none, right? Except for Haverhill. In 1926, 100 residents mysteriously came down with a strange illness, which doctors later traced back to one River Street dairy and some rat-contaminated milk. The illness was later termed Haverhill fever. I kind of wish I didn't know that. It's really gross. We have a castle, you guys. Okay, you probably already knew that. But did you know that it was built as a summer home for Dr. James Nichols in 1875? I think I'm going to go inside and check it out. Famous Massachusetts Murders, Part 1. Wealthy society matron Clara Clement Ellis was found dead in her home here in February 1931, and local high school boy Russell Noble stood accused of the crime. He would end up serving 20 years in prison. This story is further detailed in Arthur Vesey's book, A Reasonable Doubt. Ellis lived in this home on Summer Street, which was historically significant even before she came along. In the mid-1800s, it was a well-known stop on the Underground Railroad. Homeowner David Harmon was good friends with poet and abolitionist John Greenleaf Whittier. This is the only known, still standing Underground Railroad stop in Haverhill. Famous Massachusetts Murders, Part 2. The Lizzie Borden case was one of the most famous Massachusetts murders ever, and it had a Haverhill connection. William H. Moody was the prosecutor on the Borden case, and although he didn't win it, he would go on to become Secretary of the Navy, and he lived here in Haverhill. Moody School is named for him.
First telephone call. Haverhill businessman Thomas Sanders was an early supporter of Alexander Graham Bell. The first ever business-to-business telephone call was placed here in Haverhill at Sanders' home.
Haverhill's most famous export? Archie Comics. Creator Bob Montana loved his years at HHS so much he immortalized it as Riverdale. And some of his characters are based on actual 1930s HHS students.
Residents in Haverhill. 10 U.S. presidents have visited Haverhill, 7 while in office, including Ulysses Grant, Harry Truman, George Washington, Teddy Roosevelt, William Howard Taft, Benjamin Harrison, John F. Kennedy, and James Polk. Over the last decade, the old Pan Am train tracks along the river were converted into the gorgeous Bradford Rail Trail, 0.6 miles of greenery, river views, and award-winning sculpture. What's the oldest street in Haverhill? It's Mill Street, where the Pentucket tribe sold their riverside land to English settlers in 1642.
Haverhill was home to the legendary Hannah Duston, the first woman in the United States to be honored with a statue. There are now 5 memorials to her around New Hampshire and Massachusetts.
Why is Harbor Place called Harbor Place? Because it's where freight and tourist steamships used to dock in the 1800s. Shipbuilding was actually Haverhill's biggest industry before shoes. Mason & Hamlin's internationally famous concert pianos have been manufactured on Duncan Street in Haverhill for the past 29 years. Professional musicians know them as one of the world's greatest instruments. Essex County's only ski area is right here in Haverhill, the beloved Ski Bradford, in operation since 1948.
If I were standing in the spot 80-something years ago, I would be underwater. The Great Flood of 1936 caused a 30-foot rise in the Merrimack River, devastating downtown. After the flood, the Army Corps of Engineers built a few preventative measures, including the flood wall and the Little River Tunnel.
Another amazing fun fact, there is an underground river in downtown Haverhill. 2,000 feet of Little River, almost a half mile, was covered in 1937 after the Great Flood. The covered portion stretches from Essex Street all the way to the Merrimack River.
Bet you didn't know that Stuart Weitzman, legendary shoe designer, got his start designing here in the 1960s at his father's factory, Seymour Shoes, on Essex Street.
The Museum of Printing. Looking for a unique and funky, yet educational place to visit? The Museum of Printing on Thornton Street houses everything you can imagine related to print. In fact, it's home to the largest collection of historic print-related material on the East Coast.
This is a really big secret, you guys. Haverhill has an award-winning television station. HC Media has been honored to win many awards in our 30-year history. Most recently, in 2016, the Best Access Station in the Northeast from the Alliance for Community Media. Thanks to everyone for coming along on the ride through 100 episodes and 4 wonderful years. Here's to many more years of bringing you the latest and greatest stories courtesy of HC Media. I'm Lindsay Paris for the Haverhill Journal, and we'll see you next time.